Hello and welcome back to Talking Freight, our weekly series brought to you by Cerasis, a North American transportation management solutions company. In Talking Freight, you'll learn practical tips in the freight and transportation industry. You can take these tips back to your own practice and improve your own transportation department. This week we kick off our mini-series on all things less than truckload shipping. Now, Cerasis has been helping shippers manage less than truckload shipping for over 20 years with a transportation management system and related services. When it comes to LTL, it's one of those more difficult modes to manage. Full truckload can be pretty straightforward, but with LTL you could be dealing with multiple packages, multiple pallets, several LTL carriers, and of course, making sure you get the best rate, and at the end of the day, that you're prepared to deal with all of the issues that might come up when shipping LTL. So we'll start with the first topic in our LTL series to help you better and understand LTL shipping. Remember, the more knowledge you have, the better prepared you are to be proactive, gain efficiencies, and reduce overall costs. So let's get right into today's topic. We're going to talk about the 10 factors that make up an LTL freight rate. Now, when you book a shipment with an LTL carrier, at the end of the day, you're most likely going to choose which carrier based on who is the least cost. And you just see a rate. But there's tons of factors that go into that. So let's explain all 10. The first, and it's one of the more important, is weight. Now, based on the weight, the more a shipment weighs up to the limit of about 5,000 pounds, the threshold for LTL, the less it's going to cost. It's based on per 100 pounds or hundredweight. The next factor is density. Now, you may have remembered from our first episode of Talking Freight where we talked a little bit about density. So make sure you check out that video to see more. But density is essentially the total weight divided by cubic feet. So that also factors into the next and number 3 point here, class. Class and the way it's chosen, a big factor of that is density. So class are simply codes that you put in your information before you pick the carrier you're going to use, and they use that to determine your ultimate rate. And those are published in the NMFC book. Now, we're going to leave a link down in the description so you can get access quickly to that book and see all of the available classes. There are about 18 of them. The next factor, of course, is distance. Just like on a plane, if you happen to go a really, really long distance, it's simply going to cost more. A big portion of that is fuel. So that's the main factor, fuel. Now, when you may be dealing with LTL carriers, some of them are regional and they can't really go from point A to point B. So they may subcontract out to another regional LTL carrier. That's called interlining. So that could also increase your rate, and that might be a part of that longer haul. The fifth factor are base rates. Now, every single carrier has a base rate and it's quoted per 100 pounds. You're going to need to know what those are with each of your carriers. Now we'll talk about another factor having to do with each carrier and how the rates are factored in a different way beyond that base rate. But read those tariffs, understand the base rate, and know that it's a big factor in your ultimate price that you see at time of shipment. Another factor having to do with class is something in the industry called FAK, which stands for Freight All Kinds. Now, what this allows you to do, instead of having to put a class for every single commodity within your shipment, it allows you to take various different products that you may ship from the low end to the high end and get one simple class called FAK. This can be advantageous because if you are maybe 1 month shipping higher classed items, which means a higher rate, then your freight of all kinds may lower that overall cost. So it can be effective, but a caveat, it can cost you money. So it's very important that you review your FAK if you have that in place from time to time. Another factor that is coming up more often are minimums. The pricing with LTL freight rates that is increasing the fastest are what you call absolute minimum charges. This minimum charge is the charge below which a carrier simply will not go. Carriers are constantly requesting a 2 to 3% increase year over year for your contract rates, but $5 increases in the minimum charge. So if the minimum charge, or if the charge, I'm sorry, the cost is $70 and the minimum charge is $5, that's not 2 to 3%. That's 7.1%. So carriers are doing this because the costs for a carrier that they have experienced have far exceeded the cost that they experience for heavier shipments, and they want to normalize that so they can get those the income that they're receiving a little bit more stable. So look out for minimums. The 8th factor are negotiated rates. Now, you can use a TMS to manage this better, but what we mean by negotiated rates, and it's a little bit different than base rates, is what you are doing is you're looking at your shipment volume, maybe historically over the last year, and you notice that you have some specific lanes, let's say 10 lanes that you're constantly shipping in, that you've used a bunch of different carriers, and it may make sense for you to put out a request for pricing to multiple carriers and negotiate specific lanes and specific rates to your shipment history for multiple carriers. And the reason I say use a TMS is because if you're going to then execute your LTL shipping by using multiple negotiated rates with multiple LTL carriers, it could become quite unmanageable for you to do it by spreadsheet or manual notes or simply calling up the carriers and using their individual websites. A TMS can kind of consolidate all that information into one central point. You put in your information, and then it gives you all of those different LTL carriers with those rates already factored in that you've negotiated. Number 9, speaking of negotiations, you can also do negotiated discounts. Now this is a little bit like negotiated rates where you look at your shipment history, you may have certain volume in certain lanes where you can have some leverage. Another way to do this is by forming a buying group. Let's say you're a part of a distribution association and you come in together and you kind of get discounts based on the group's volume. Another great way is to use and leverage a 3PL's national pricing and their group pricing. A 3PL has hundreds, if not thousands, of shippers, and their rates might be a little more competitive than what you can get as an individual shipper. And then lastly, the last factor that goes into LTL rates are accessorials or surcharges. We all have to deal with these. Now, these are just little extra charges for things that you may need for that shipment. You may need a lift gate, you may need to go into a residential area, you may get into a limited access place, maybe in a metropolitan city. So these are just extra things that a carrier can add on. Now, it is important that if you can, make sure you are explicit in telling the carrier this is what you need and putting that on your bill of lading. They may come back and charge you and you get an increased invoice that you didn't expect to see, kind of throws off of all your other accounting and puts the system a little less inefficient. So that's why, again, I recommend using something like a transportation management system like the Cerasis Rater, where you can select those different accessorial options for each shipment ahead of time and not be surprised in the back end. So those are the 10 factors that go into making up an LTL freight rate. Definitely worth knowing. Make sure you check out the link below this video in the description. We're going to put a link to a blog post of the same title, which goes into much more detail so you can get more knowledge. And make sure you tune in next week into Talking Freight. We'll continue our series on LTL. You'll get super educated on the subject. You'll become a lot more confident, and in no time, you'll be much more efficient and save money. So make sure you don't forget to subscribe to Talking Freight. Hit that little bell button so you get a notification for each new video. We publish every single Friday. We hope you're enjoying the series, and have a great day.